Welcome, everybody, to the Evolution Network. I am your host, Joseph Potter, and joining me today is Chris Ransom. And, well, people, it's that time of year. It is time. The college football playoffs are among us, and this is the part 2 of the College Football Bowl special. And, Chris, this looks the most exciting college football season we've in the entire playoff scenario. So, what do you think about the overall playoff matchups that we've got today?
Well, we've got Alabama versus Clemson, part 3. And the reason I say it's part 3 is because they met in the last 2 championship games. This is part 3. Each team's won a game. This is part 3. This is the best 2 out of 3 for the this is for all the marbles to see who gets to move on, and then we get Georgia. And the SEC championship, they hinted that if Auburn won, we could get an Alabama-Auburn championship game. But really, we might end up with Alabama versus Georgia, meaning the SEC championship might not even count because it's played in Atlanta, same location as this year's SEC championship. So if we get 2 SEC teams playing in Atlanta again for the championship game, then this year's SEC championship really doesn't count when you think about it.
Well, that's true because the SEC champion will literally be the national champion this year. So, I mean,
Alabama and Georgia both win. It means that the Auburn-Georgia game doesn't count if Alabama beats Georgia.
Yeah, and speaking of which, if we're going to get into the SEC, we're going to get into Georgia. Let's just jump in head first with number 3 Georgia taking on Oklahoma in the first of our 2 playoff games, coming at you from the Rose Bowl, presented by Northwestern Mutual at 5 p.m. on ESPN from Pasadena, California. And this is probably going to be the most telling game of all the games, because I'm not just talking about playoffs, but otherwise, because you have a Georgia team with Nick Chubb, who had a slow start coming back from injury and really picked it up, rushing for 1,175 yards, 13 touchdowns, ended the season with 6.2 average. Jake Fromm from Georgia, 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 63% completion percentage, and first-round prospect Raekwon Smith on defense, 72 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks, going up against Baker Mayfield, who swept all the awards, took home all the trophies, best quarterback, best player, Heisman, took them all home. So this is going to be a game that is a high-powered shootout because, surprisingly, something that I didn't realize was that Georgia is number 23 in the nation in points scored. They're averaging almost 35 points a game. So they can keep up with Oklahoma's offense. But the question is, will Baker Mayfield be able to manhandle the Georgia defense the way he did the TCU defense? So, Chris, what do you think about all of that?
Yeah, and that is going to be the big question here. Can they manhandle this Oklahoma offense? Because I look at the Georgia offense. The defense for the Georgia Bulldogs, they have some players. They've got Raekwon Smith, their undisputed leader at inside linebacker, who I've moved into my top 10. They have Lorenzo Carter complimenting him off the edge. They've got another pass rusher who's pretty good as well. They've got Trent Thompson at defensive tackle. They've got Dominic Sanders at strong safety. And Thompson and Sanders are under-the-radar players. They're not key players, but they're solid role players. So you've got the Mark Andrews, Dominic Sanders matchup to watch. There's a lot of different matchups in this game to watch, but Roquan versus Baker is probably the most appealing matchup because you've got a middle linebacker who's ascended into the top 10 now, and you've got the Heisman Trophy winner. So this is a big matchup at the Rose Bowl here. Probably the big matchup because if Roquan can get the best of Baker and if Nick Chubb can run the football, then Georgia has the blueprint to beat Oklahoma. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm taking Georgia in this game. I know you're taking Oklahoma. Oklahoma has some weapons, and Georgia's weakness is at their cornerback play. And that's something Baker can certainly exploit if Orlando Brown wins the matchup against Lorenzo Carter and Georgia's pass rush. So this is a big game for both teams.
Yeah, and the really want to stress right now is that for Baker Mayfield, this game answers all the questions. This game is, for him, the biggest game of his career. Not simply because it is a college football bowl game, but because you've got questions about his height. This guy's 6'1", 220 pounds. He is not a small man. Okay, everybody says he's small, his frame won't hold up, yada yada. He's 6'1". People say, "Oh, he's 6 foot." No, he's 6'1". Okay, he is the same size of Drew Brees. Okay, he's 220 pounds. It's not the perfect frame for the. I'm not saying he's going to go into the NFL North and get hit by a couple Ravens and be happy, but he's not a fragile person either. He's mobile. He's got great accuracy. So we're going to see everybody has questions about his arm strength, questions about his footwork. Everybody's got all these questions. Everybody has questions about, oh, he played in the Big 12. These guys have soft defenses. They can't do anything. He's running around, just man among boys. He's playing with children on defense. This is going to answer those questions. Georgia is not a team, as you stated, that you're going to go in and push over defensively. They're probably the best defense, arguably, with Alabama. I'm sure Kerm would argue that point. In the SEC, maybe one of the best in the power conferences in college football. So Oklahoma, as far as I'm concerned, this is Baker Mayfield's game to lose. This is going to be, is Baker Mayfield worthy of being the number one quarterback in this draft, which I have been saying for 3 years, that he is going to be the man in this draft? Or is he going to fall to the second round like so many other people have been saying for second, third round prospect? And this game is going to be the telltale sign. Is Baker Mayfield that man? And I believe he's going to answer those questions, and that's why I believe Oklahoma is going to win, because this is going to be Baker Mayfield's game to lose.
Yeah, and I think regardless of what happens, unless Baker has like a Troy Smith or Brady Quinn type outing, I don't think his first-round stock is in any jeopardy whatsoever. Even if Georgia wins and it's close and Baker puts up 5 touchdowns, I don't think his stock is in any jeopardy whatsoever.
No, but Baker has to play well. That's what I'm getting at. He has to show that win or lose, he has to show that his passion, his ability, everything that just brings together, that has had me hooked since day one. Ever since his days running around in the second team practice squad, whatever you want to call it, at Texas Tech in 2013, to his first year in Oklahoma in 2015. This guy is going to have to show hey, I'm the man. Because let me read off a little something, little history lesson. Texas Tech, 2013, 8 games, 218 completions and 340 attempts, 64.1 completion percentage, 2,315 yards, 6.8 yards an attempt, 6.3 average yards attempt, 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. As a true freshman at Texas Tech. Had a 127.7 QB rating in 8 games. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Turn around.
Never should have left Texas Tech, but the coaching staff mismanaged that situation by forcing him to compete with Davis, Webb, and Mahomes for the starting gig.
Well, you had
Baker.
Let's put that in perspective. That was a no-win situation for Texas Tech. I mean, in the NFL, that would have been a win all the way around to have that quarterback group. But in college football, 3 guys who are all number 1 QBs, all NFL prospects, coming in as freshmen, and they're all sitting here competing against each other. You are not going to keep all 3 of those guys and keep them happy. I'm sorry. It's like, I love your recruiting class. I mean, that your recruiting class is absolutely amazing for those 2 years. But in the end, I mean, only one guy's going to play. Only one guy's going to win out. And that should tell you something, that Baker Mayfield over Davis Webb and Patrick Mahomes started 8 games through 340 passes. Completed 64% of his passes.
That they won.
Yeah, in that situation, that should initially just rang my bell when I first saw Mayfield. Then, I kind of forgot about him. I'll admit it. I put him out of my head, freshman, he transferred. Okay, well, see him in a couple years. I've focused on the guys in the draft and everything that we're playing. It's kind of the thing I do, it's like out of sight, out of mind. Then I saw Oklahoma's, I think it was their second game of the year, and here comes Mayfield. I'm like, oh, I remember this guy. He's pretty good. And he just blew my mind away. And in that 2015 season, he started all 13 games, 269. He was 395 attempts, 269 completions, 68% passing, 3,700 yards, 9.4 yards an attempt, 36 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Like, okay, this guy, he's back, and he's back with a vengeance. He looks pretty pissed. Team rolls around. Because 2015, remember, he was a Heisman finalist in 2015. So don't forget that one. 2016 rolls around. Starts all 13 games again. Throws 358 passes, 254 completions. Has 3,965 yards. He's throwing at 70.9%. He is averaging 11.1 yards an attempt, and his average is 12.3. Touchdowns, 40 to 8 interceptions, 196 QB rating. He should have been in the Heisman running then. I think he only ended up being a Heisman semifinalist. Fast forward this year. Everybody's like, oh, he's too small. He's got all these questions. All of a sudden, these questions pop up for the first time in freshman at Texas Tech. So what happens? Mayfield walks out here as a senior, 262 of 369, 71%. 2 straight years of 70% Completion percentage. 4,340 yards. Most yards in his career. Not the most completions in his career. Most yards in his career. Not even the most attempts in his career. Still got the most yards. 11.8 yards per attempt. But for every completion, he was 13.4 yards. 41 touchdowns, most touchdowns in his career. Only 5 interceptions, the fewest interceptions in his career. People compare him to Johnny Manziel. I don't see Baker Mayfield sleeping with hookers, getting drunk in a hot tub, having his team come through, his teammates saying, I don't want to play for him in the NFL, and all this, that, and the other. He was suspended for 1 quarter.
Yeah, and let me tell you a story about Baker Mayfield real quickly. A real quick story about Baker Mayfield.
Okay.
Instagram, he took a photo of his girlfriend to the lake, and then he said, I'm going to bring her back in time before the sun goes down. I'm just going to take her to the lake. That's how much of a gentleman Baker is.
Yeah, so. And that, I mean, he's a gentleman. He's a good guy. He's a passionate player. But here's the thing that spoke volumes to me. During that time he was suspended for that quarter, for making that obscene gesture, what happened? They didn't vote for another captain to come on to the field with the captains for Oklahoma. Mayfield wasn't a captain that game. What the players did, they took Mayfield's jersey. One captain on one side, one captain on the other, holding his jersey out, and his jersey was in the middle, and they walked it to center field. Do you know what it's? Just stop and just take that in. Out of everything you've seen, they are willing to not only walk into the fires of hell behind this guy, but they're willing to take his jersey because they don't want to vote another captain in for the game. They don't want to do any of that. And they walk that jersey out to the center of the field for the coin toss to be their head captain. His jersey. What does that tell you about the player and the leader that he is, and the man who commands the respect that he does? That right there tells you all you need to know about whether Baker Mayfield can make it in the NFL. Because that is the leader that people are going to look at. I can guarantee you GMs who had a second-round grade on Mayfield looked at that and said, that's the guy I want leading my team.
John Dorsey's already scouted 6 of Baker Mayfield's games. I think there is an outside shot Baker could jump Rosen.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with this game. I'm going to point out a few moments for you this year that really stands out and shows you who Baker Mayfield is. He turned down a porn star for a hookup for his girlfriend. That moment you talked about with his girlfriend, the romantic side of him. Planting the flag on Ohio Stadium. I've been to the Horseshoe, and I will tell you right now, you plant that takes balls to do what he did, planting that flag in the Horseshoe. Because being from Ohio, I will tell you, he could have been mugged out as soon as he walked out of that stadium. Could have been mugged, could have been shot. Those fans are rabid at times. So that was ballsy to the extreme. That shows the passion that he has. Then, walk forward. Record-setting game. 690-something yards against Oklahoma State. Massive game on huge stage. He really stepped up right there. Come back. He's suspended for an obscene gesture on the sideline. Only 1 half. Guess what happens? Oh. Let's look. They bring his jersey onto the field because they strip him of his captaincy for 1 game. They don't vote for another captain. They don't want anybody else walking out there. They take his jersey to lead them out. That type of leader. You want that. Then when his replacement, his backup, a guy who's smaller than he is, like 5'11", makes a touchdown. He's running up and down the sideline celebrating this guy. And just that type of leadership, that type of enthusiasm. Then, so you take all the talent, you take all the enthusiasm, you take all the passion, you take everything that he is, all the respect that he is given, the leadership that he shows, the maturity overall that he shows. And you know he's not going to do anything. He's not going to go out and act a fool. He's not going to go partying. He's not going to go clubbing. He's not going to go sleeping with hookers. He's not going to do all this foolishness. So you know that. And then you put all that into what could be the biggest game of his life up to this point against Georgia. If he not only pulls this out, but if he has one of those Baker Mayfield games where he throws 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 400 yards, Oklahoma wins. Chris, what does that do for his status?
It elevates it even more. And this is the thing. In all of my years of evaluating quarterbacks, this is the toughest year for me to evaluate because I have Rosen, Baker, and Lamar all at 91 grades. And you can make an argument for Baker as QB1. You can make an argument for Rosen. Heck, you can even make an argument for Lamar. Maybe even Darnold. I won't go that far yet, but I'm just saying there are so many quarterbacks. You can make a quarterback argument for any of those 4, and teams will have their cases, their arguments, their debates. But Baker has just been consistent throughout the year to the point where I'm not going to be shocked if he goes number 1 overall.
And I'm going to tell you right now, the matchup to watch, Baker Mayfield at that quarterback position, 6'1", 220 pounds. He was, look down here, who is it? Roquan Smith, sorry.
Georgia linebacker.
Yeah, I wrote it down wrong. That's Georgia linebacker, as you said, 10.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 72 tackles.
113 total tackles, 72 solo.
Yeah. I didn't add them up. I was being lazy. My bad. But 1, can Smith get to him? 2, how's Mayfield going to handle the pressure? 3, when Smith drops back, will Mayfield be able to read that zone?
Yeah, during the SEC championship, Roquan Smith was making sacks. He was getting hurries on Jarrett Stidham. He was dropping into coverage, stopping the run, doing everything you wanted your star middle linebacker to do. So can he show that same fire, enthusiasm, and passion versus Baker Mayfield in the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, because this could be Roquan Smith versus Baker Mayfield as a matchup, most likely to determine who wins this game.
Yeah, and I have a top 5 grade on Baker and a top 10 grade on Roquan. And I moved Roquan from the 2nd round all the way into the top 10 a few weeks ago when I noticed how dominant he was on tape. So that should speak volumes.
Yeah, it should. I believe that the entire reach-around focus of this game is we have Nick Chubb, we have Jake Fromm having the quiet but spectacular year. We have all these other elements. You got the receivers for Oklahoma putting up great numbers.
The tight end, you've got Mark Andrews on Oklahoma, John Mackey Award winner, declaring for the draft already, and then you've got senior Jeb Blazevit. Doesn't really get involved in the passing game, but he's a great blocker for Chubb in the backfield as a tight end.
Yeah, and you have great offensive lines on both sides. You have all these underlying factors, but
Great
I believe
pass rushers too. Georgia's got Isaiah Wynn at left tackle, projected play guard. Oklahoma's got Ogbonina Okoronkwo, the pass rusher off the edge. So,
Absolutely. But I think that the matchup of Baker Mayfield versus Roquan Smith,
is what separates everything.
that's going to determine this game. If Mayfield puts all that together that he has done, that I named off, that he has done just this year, and is able to, because people say, oh, he doesn't scan the field well. Well, he doesn't scan the field well. Smith's going to have a field day. So we're going to see.
I disagree with that
Smith,
assessment.
Mayfield.
When I scouted Mayfield at the beginning of the year, I saw a man that can make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 progressions. I look for the QBs that can make 6 progressions on tape. Rosen showed that. Darnold showed that. Baker showed that. So
yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what all the people are saying. You can't make reads. He's Big 12 quarterback and everything. You and I know that it's not true. You know, they say you can't play under center. You and I know it's not true.
because I even found a photo on Google Images debunking that myth.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you know, but in the end, all these questions that everybody's asking, all this BS is being thrown out there. Baker's either going to prove that it's true or he's going to prove that it's not true. And in the end, it's all going to be Smith into the turf or Mayfield beating him in the passing game. That's what it's going to be. That's going to determine this game. So, I mean, that's just the way it is at the moment. And as much as I would love, I think we could keep going on this game for a while. We're going to have to move on. And because we got at least one more game to go. And that game is the college football playoff at the All-State Sugar Bowl. 8:45 p.m. on ESPN, number 4 Alabama versus number 1 Clemson. And that is going to be at Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans. And I got to tell you, this is one that I am personally looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to it as much as the Georgia-Oklahoma game, but I'm looking forward to it as anybody who says, we've got a guy or 2 guys that are considered NFL ready on Clemson. And we have probably the best defense in college football. And that is something that that's going to be an intriguing matchup. Let's just put it that way. That's going to be an intriguing matchup because the Dabo Swinney ended up 12-1. They were averaging 35.4 points a game, which is 21st in the country. Okay, they only gave up 166 points. So these guys, this is an ACC matchup. Clemson, number 1, Alabama, number 4. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say everything's terrible. You know, it's like we don't have any major injuries in this game that I know of. But this is something that I'm going to look at is the Clemson running game, great running game for the most part. They have guys, they're very balanced. The Kelly Bryant, who's their quarterback, great dual threat quarterback, had 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 67% passing. And he also has 173 rushing attempts, 664 yards.
This guy was the number 1 quarterback in Walter Football's 2019 mock draft at one point, Kelly Bryant. So
yeah, and then
I don't think he's going to be a top 10, top 5 pick like Walt's making him out to be, but I do think he's going to be a top 20 pick.
I think that he has a lot of I think he has a lot of room to grow.
Yes.
His biggest problem, in my opinion, with the way he plays is like everybody's talking about Baker Mayfield's size. This guy's only 215
People were
pounds.
talking about Watson's brilliance and how this game was a learning experience for Jalen Hurts. Now it's a learning experience for Kelly Bryant.
Well, let's put it this way. Bryant is 215 pounds. 6'3", yes, but 215 pounds regardless. He's only a junior. Personally, I think he should go back to school because he's got to bulk up a little bit. He's got to bulk up. He's got to show that he can pass for more than 12 touchdowns a year. But at the same time, I want to look further into the rushing game.
It's because he's afraid he's going to lose the starting job to Trevor Lawrence, that other highly touted high school recruit that we talked about. But I think they're going to redshirt him. And then he's going to play 2 years like Winston.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about a freshman coming in and taking your job, especially if, you got him to the number 1 overall and into the college football playoff. If you're worried about a freshman coming in, there's something wrong with you. But the rest of the running game, this is a very balanced running game. I want to put some numbers. Bryant, 646 yards. Travis Etienne, 744 yards. Tavian Feaster, 659 yards. Adam Choice, 312 yards. CJ Fuller, 217 yards. Their rushing attack is stacked. They have 5 guys over 200 yards rushing. That is insane. That's going to bring up an entirely new degree of difficulty for Alabama because you do not, under any circumstances, have any clues to what they're doing. Yet, no, they're running the ball. Kelly Bryant's accurate. He threw 362 passes. So, he's not just tucking and running. He's throwing 67% on 362 passes. But at the same time, you've got 5 guys who are just running the ball like nobody's business. It's absolutely unheard of. All of them averaging 3.7 yards or higher on that. And you have Kelly Bryant, 11 touchdowns. Etienne, 13 touchdowns. Feaster, 7 touchdowns. Choice, 6 touchdowns. Fuller, 3 touchdowns. So it's not just between the 20s. These guys are doing it within the 20s. They're doing it within the red zone. So that, Chris, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, that's going to bring up a heck of a matchup problem for Alabama.
Yep. That is going to bring up a heck of a problem for Alabama. And Alabama's got some linebackers. Well, they've got one. Sean Dion Hamilton suffered a season-ending injury earlier in the year. So it's going to come down to Rashaan Evans and what he does.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Evans. So I believe he can step up to the plate. But at the same time, whether you can step up to the plate or not at this point may not mean anything if your teammates don't step up, because that's a lot of ground to cover. They are 12th in the nation in scoring, 39.1 per game. They have an 11-1 record, which is a good record. Unfortunately, they don't have the best strength of schedule. So they really haven't been tested the way you would expect a top team to be tested. But at the same time, you have Jalen Hurts, which I've said it all year, the guy he is as one-dimensional as you can get. He has 15 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he's throwing at 60% passing. But I have seen some passes that it may sit there and just stare at my screen and blink a few times because they are so inaccurate. They're so wild. It's like even a little screen pass can go 5 yards behind the receiver. It's amazing how inaccurate he can be. He is not a great passer. at the same time, he has a lot of weapons to choose from. I know Bo Scarborough hasn't had a great year. 5.1, still has 5.1 yards per attempt and 8 touchdowns rushing. And then you have Damian Harris, same deal, 11 touchdowns, 8.2 yards average, 906 yards on 110 attempts. But the leading rusher, as far as attempts go, is Jalen Hurts, the quarterback. So the quarterback has 100. He has more rushing attempts than he has passing completions. He has 137 rushing attempts and only 136 passing completions. So, I mean, that should tell you, beyond anything else, this guy is a runner first and a passer second. I mean, they have a great running game. This is 2 great running teams in the matchup. It's Tua Tagovailoa. I don't even know how to pronounce that. But he has 15 attempts for 106 yards, 7.1 yards per and 2 touchdowns. And then you have 7 more above him. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 guys over 100 rushing yards. And you have 3 guys with Scarborough, Hurts, and Harris with over 8 rushing touchdowns. So, in that sense, you have 2 teams that are great running teams. And sorry for Tagovailoa, or I'm still trying to pronounce your name. If you ever listen to this, I'm sure I will get it right at some point, or just drop a.
Is he on Alabama or Clemson?
Alabama. He is the number 8 rusher who has 106 yards. But either way, you have to look at it and say, these 2 teams, this is not going to be a passing game. This is not going to be a weak at heart game.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
He's listed as a QB on Bama's roster. That's weird.
Yeah, he's a runner. Yeah, because he's 35 of 53, 66% passing. So, yeah, he has 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. He actually has a better passer rating than Hurts. So, I mean, he's a quarterback, but as far as rushing goes, he fits right into the whole I am I can get rushing touchdowns. I can run the ball. We're going to make it happen. And that's the thing about all of these guys on both teams. They can run the ball, and they can both play good defense. That is the staple of both teams. So I expect both teams to come out. I expect them to throw a few passes, try to open up the running game. But in the end, I expect this to be a hard-nosed, punch-you-in-the-mouth heavyweight matchup. And this is just like 2 heavyweight boxers going at it, or 2 heavyweight UFC fighters. And these guys are going to go at each other, and I expect the person who hits hardest to come away with the win. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that whoever plays with more intensity is obviously going to win. The question is who's going to show up and who's going to show us that they want this the most.
And I think that is the biggest question, because this is, as you said, this is the rubber match between them. They are 1-1 over the last 2 years. This is the third game. This is the game that's going to determine over the last 3 years which of these teams are better. Which of these teams want it more. So I think there's also a lot of pride on the line in this game.
Yep.
For some reason, I'm thinking it's going to be a smash mouth game, and it's going to come down to the quarterback who makes the big throw to keep this thing alive. Maybe put them in field goal range. And I just have a gut feeling that's the type of game this is going to be.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris, I know you're concentrating heavily.
I mean, you look at Alabama, they've got Calvin Ridley. Clemson's got Deion Kane, but both of these teams have prided themselves on their defensive play. I mean, Clemson's more stout in the front seven this year. Austin Bryant, Clellan Ferrell, Dex Lawrence, a 2019 guy, and Christian Wilkins. Their defensive line is absolutely stout. It's staggering. It's through the roof. Whereas Alabama is much deeper in terms of where they are this year as far as their secondary goes. And Clemson's got a decent secondary too. So I expect this to be like a 17-13 game. And I'm going to take Alabama because Jalen Hurts has been here before. You can't say the same about Kelly Bryant, but I'm expecting this to be a very low-scoring game. I don't think either team gets 20 points, to be honest, because these defenses are just that good. I'm not trying to take anything away from either team. I just think the defenses are that good.
Yeah, and I'm right with you. I think I'm the same way, and I think that I'm even with you on the result. I'm looking at a potential Alabama versus Oklahoma championship. And if that happens, the amount of talent and the way draft stocks are going to yo-yo for both sides will be absolutely out of this world. I mean, you look at the amount of talent that would be in that matchup, and something would have to give.
Yeah, literally something would have to give. Alabama's deep at running back too, though, so we'll see what happens in that game. But I'm taking Alabama and Georgia, and I mean Alabama versus Georgia in the Georgia Dome. I feel like Alabama's going to end up winning it, but we'll see what happens in that game. I know you're taking Oklahoma to win it all. They're the team you picked.
Yeah, I stuck with my Oklahoma. I stuck with my Oklahoma pick for all year for the most part. So I'm going to stick with them. I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon at this point. It would be rather dumb of me to just say, last second, hey, guess what? Let's go off the bandwagon. Like, no. So I think I'm not gonna do that. And so who are you taking? You're taking Georgia versus Alabama?
Yep, and I'm going to take Bama to win it all.
I'm taking Oklahoma, Alabama, and I'm taking Oklahoma to win it. And this, well, I don't want to get too far away from the overall meaning of this bowl. I want to go down to a game we were talking about the other day in the first part of our bowl series, and I want to look at
the
what it
implications
could
of what
potentially
down the
mean
line.
to the overall landscape of the college bowls, because it is a huge, huge game. It's the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, number 12 UCF versus number 7 Auburn. UCF is undefeated at this point.
They're the only FBS team without a loss at this point.
Yes, and it will be at 12:30 p.m. on ESPN in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And it'll be nationally televised. UCF is not a power conference team. They are the only undefeated team. If they beat number 7 Auburn, they go undefeated. They beat a team that has beaten 2 number 1s this year. How does that affect what the people who select the playoff game, how does that affect how they see these non-power conference teams? Because the University of Central Florida, well, a good school, always been a pretty good football school.
And this has been a problem for years. They've only put Power 5 teams in the playoff. They've ignored everyone else. It's going to take a team like Central Florida to beat a team like Auburn for them to say, you know what, we've got to start considering these non-Power 5 schools.
Yeah, they're going to have to beat Auburn. They're going to have to do it convincingly. And they're going to have to do it this year. They're going to have to do it right now when they're undefeated. Because anything else, they're like, well, they still lost a game. Oh, well, they did this. Oh, well, they did that. There is no, oh, well.
In the playoff.
Yeah, there is no, oh, well, right now. They do it. They do it convincingly. Does this potentially change the landscape, or at least make the committee stop and say, well, maybe these guys, maybe we should take a little bit harder look at these other conferences and, maybe not change things overnight, but say, okay, these guys, they're pretty darn good. Yeah. Can you make that argument?
You certainly can.
And so that's, for me, that may be, well, I really love a couple of these other bowl matchups, which I stated in part 1. I think, well, the Oklahoma-Georgia game is probably the most important for the top of the NFL draft. Important game for the future of the college football playoffs itself may sit in the Peach Bowl with UCF. Because if UCF pulls this off, they pull it off convincingly, it could spark a major debate among college presidents as to who gets in these playoffs, which would make the committee think twice. I mean, because we all know, as much as the athletic directors, the coaches, the chancellors, all these other people get the notoriety for everything that happens, the president of that school is really the man pulling the punches, or woman, depending on who's there. They're the person pulling the punches. They're the ones that, if there's a debate to be raised, it's not the chancellor, the student body and all that other stuff that pulls the punches. It's the president of that school, not nobody else. And it's the presidents of those schools that raise the fuss. If UCF makes it convincingly, their president speaks up, that debate's going to rage, and it's going to rage all the way up until next year, and potentially until we may end up seeing an expansion to at least 6 teams in the college football playoff, simply because UCF beat Auburn, and we'll also be looking at maybe the Power 5 conferences aren't all that Power 5. You know, you got other conferences that can step up too. So, I mean, all it's going to take is that president, convincingly, that president speaking up, making a fuss. Oh, guess what? Here comes the debate. Here comes the shouting. Because everything changes from that point on.
Yep.
I hear your key clicking. It's very soft. Very gentle. You're caressing your computer as I am talking
Right,
about
I'm trying to get some info on a prospect, but yeah.
It's very soft. It's very gentle. I am talking about a very violent game, and you're being very gentle at the moment.
You're talking about a very violent game. You're talking about the Peach Bowl. You're talking about Central Florida Auburn. So, yeah.
And you're being gentle. It's like we're talking about people running into each other.
No,
slamming
actually,
each
I'm
other into the
looking at
ground.
research on Southern Jaguars quarterback Danny Johnson, who got a Senior Bowl invite, because Tony told me about this guy in the summer, and I just assumed he wouldn't get in because Tony's track record the last 2 years with the cornerbacks was pretty shaky. But he did get in, and I liked his tape. So
Okay, so you're not being gentle. As long as you're not being gentle, we're good.
I'm not being gentle.
Excellent, excellent. Because this is a very, very violent place. We do not need to be gentle here.
Nope.
Yeah, I know. It's a wonderful thing to put in there. But yeah, UFC is that game, or UCF right now, is in position to change the entire landscape of college football. And so that may be the most important bowl game that we have seen over the last few years, simply by magnitude of what can happen depending on the outcome of that game.
I agree. That's definitely a huge game for both teams, because that could alter the playoff, that could expand the playoff, that could make them realize they need to put a non-Power 5 team in. There's a lot of different variables that come into play.
Yes, absolutely. It could end up being almost like the Rooney ruling, the NFL, where a minority has to be interviewed for an office position. It could be something like that, where a non-Power 5 team has to be considered for the playoffs, whether they make it or not. They have to be considered for it, or else they don't get, or else they can't put a team in the playoffs. So
yeah, they have to create a rule where if a team went unbeaten, they'd end up in the playoff.
Yeah, it would be an automatic in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go unbeaten, you're automatically in.
Yeah, so I mean that would, and there is so much that can be done if UCF wins this game and if they win it convincingly.
That's why I'm rooting for Central Florida to win. Auburn may end up winning the game, but I'm rooting for Central Florida because it's in the best interest of the future for college football.
If you're a fan and you want this thing expanded, you don't think it's right, and you are not rooting for UCF, you are doing the game a disservice, because UCF is the one team right now in position to make this happen. And I don't think anybody over the next couple years is going to be in as good a position to make it happen as UCF is right now.
Western Michigan could have gone unbeaten last year if they had beaten Wisconsin, but they would have played. They were a Big Ten team. This is an SEC opponent. and this is a statement game. I mean, it's going to be a few years until we see another unbeaten versus another SEC team in a bowl game. So,
yeah, especially one as high profile as the Peach Bowl.
Especially a team that's beaten 2 number ones like Auburn. I mean, Central Florida's got Mike Hughes. He's a good corner. Auburn's got Carlton Davis. I think the corners are going to end up having a say in this game. You still there, Joey, or did the hangout get disconnected?
I'm still here, Joey. I just haven't heard you say anything yet. All right, so right now, as far as what's going on, we've got Mike Hughes versus Carlton Davis, 2 corners in that game for Central Florida and Auburn. It is big in that regard. As far as the playoff matchup, you're looking at Deron Payne and Christian Wilkins, my top 2 defensive tackles in the Alabama-Clemson game, just revisiting that for a second. Yeah, so Brandon Parker, North Carolina AT&T's at 135. But yeah, you look at this game with Central Florida and Auburn, it is a big game, big time implications for both teams, and it could very well shape the future of the college football playoff. One more game that we talked about in part 1 that I think is going to be exciting is Ohio State versus USC, and that's the Cotton Bowl. You've got a Sam Darnold facing a Ohio State secondary with Denzel Ward, Damone Arnett, a very good Damone Webb, a lot of prospects that really have a chance to stand out. So Deontay Burnett versus Denzel Ward is going to be a fun matchup. And JT Barrett's going to be facing a USC secondary with Ivan Marshall. He's going to have Uche Nwanere, Porter Gustin off the edge, Cameron Smith at middle linebacker. So there's some talent there. So that's going to be a very good game. Rosen is what the reason it's so quiet in the background is I am working on the draft game. I'm trying to wrap it up, so I got the top 200 players up. I'm at like 195, and there's a few tight ends that have accepted Senior Bowl invites that weren't on my tight end rankings initially, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch their tape after the show. So Tyler Conklin out of Central Michigan, a guy Thomas Coburn told me about, is one of those players. There's a Notre Dame tight end, not Elias Jones, but the other guy who took his job who got a Senior Bowl invite. Ian Thomas out of Indiana is a Senior Bowl invite. He's accepted his invite. So there's a lot of tight ends who sort of under the radar at this point, pretty late in the process, but it's not completely late. It's still actually pretty preliminary, but rankings can change at any point. And when you get to 200, when you get to the 200 mark, that is when, because it's like anybody can crack that top 200.